today's training is going to focus on our custom reports module. Now, I know a lot of you were on my training from yesterday where we talked about the standard reports. To start off with custom reports today, I do want to do a quick review of the standard reports, and that's strictly because, number one, there might be people on here who have not been through that training yet, and number two, some of the things we're going to talk about today really kind of come from standard reports, and they translate over into custom reports. And so there's just a few things I want to highlight there with the standard reports within custom reports today. So I want to start off by doing just a brief overview, and then we'll get into custom reports. Now, one of the questions I get or used to get most often on this training is, how do I know if I have custom reports? Okay, the best way to tell, there's actually two. The best way to tell if you have custom reports or not is when you come over here to reports on the left-hand column of Chronicall, and I will mention this will show you the licenses that you have access to. Okay, if I click on this reports section right here, if I see create report, if you see create report here, this signifies that you have the custom reports module. If you don't have custom reports, you will not see create report there. Okay. Second way, if you're already in run reports, there is a second way to tell, and that is by what we call our report runner window. Now we're going to discuss this in detail today, but down here in the bottom right hand corner, we have this report runner window. If you have the option called report skin, that also signifies that you have custom reports. Okay, so we'll talk about report skin a little bit later, but just so you can kind of know, it sounds super Silence of the Lambsy, but let me kind of show you what custom report skins actually are. This means that the report looks, not just through values, not just through the columns that I have on the report, but also through the way that the style of the report, right? So I can add my company logo, I can change the colors to reflect my company colors, whatever I prefer to do. So I will show you how to do this today, but that's what report skin is. It's just the ability to change the way that your report looks, okay? And you can have as much creative freedom with this as you would like. So I'll show you how to do this today, but that's what report skin means. Okay, so if you see report skin down here in your report runner window, that will again signify that you have the custom reports module. Okay, so those are the two ways that you'll be able to tell. All right, cool. So for those of you just joining in, welcome to the training today. I do want to kind of just one more time reiterate some of the things that I like to mention here, which is, of course, questioning. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. Okay, ask your questions. That's okay. Don't be shy. There are a lot of people on here, yes, but a lot of them will have the same questions. So as we're on the training today, go ahead and keep yourself on mute unless you have questions, and I will give you ample opportunity to ask them. Okay, so if we get to that point, or if you even want to just interrupt me, that's perfectly fine. Just take yourself off of mute and ask the question, or send your questions through the GoToMeeting chat box, and I'll do my best to keep my eye on that throughout the training. Okay. Now, one last thing I'll mention there is this: if you don't have questions when I ask if there are any, go ahead and leave yourself on mute. The silence typically tells me, nope, no questions here. Okay, so that's just one thing I like to stress there as well. All right, cool, enough of my spiel. I think we can get going here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that just really brief overview or review of the standard reports module. Standard reports typically will cover everything that you need, right? Custom reports is a very, very specified module. It's a module that not everybody purchases, but it's a fantastic module because it allows you so much flexibility. And so we're going to show you what you can do with the reports today. Custom reports does not add additional reports to your list of standard reports. It allows you to do three things. The first thing that it allows you to do is it allows you to, of course, as we've kind of already mentioned, create reports. So you can create reports from the ground up. If you're not seeing what you're looking for, then go ahead and create your own. That's perfectly fine. Number two is it allows you to edit any of the existing standard reports. And I'll show you how to do that today as well. The third thing, of course, is how to create a report skin, which is, again, the changing the look of that report. Okay. So most of what you're going to do in custom reports will probably be done in the first two, which again is create reports and edit reports. But let's go ahead and start off with just our standard reports. I'll click on this run report section, which would take us here to this window. On the left-hand side, you're going to see a list of every one of the reports that you have available to you. I will mention right now that some of them may require further licensing, okay? Just in kind of particular to that, if you ever see campaign requires you to have recording library. So if you try to run this report just to see what it does, if you don't have recording library and if you don't have any campaigns set up, this report won't give you anything, okay? Additionally, there are a few reports that will still provide you information, but there might be information missing. For example, the agent performance summary report. The reason I say it might not give you information is because there is kind of only one column on this report that requires you to have real time. You can run this report just fine, right? For the most part, it'll give you everything here except for maybe possible total duration. And total duration has to do with what we call a feature. Features are things like group login, extension login, do not disturb, that kind of stuff. So if you don't have real time, Chronicall will not see that information. Okay, so just kind of a heads up there. If you run this report and you're thinking, why in the world is total duration not showing anything? It's because real time is not present. Okay, but you can still run this report and get most of the information there. Okay. So I'm going to walk through a few of the different reports today to kind of show you just a few things. But let's kind of come back here to the very beginning with reports, and that is, how do I know what kind of report this is going to be, and how do I know what I'm looking for? As with anything to do with Chronicall, the first thing I would always recommend is know before you go. What I basically mean by that is know what you're looking for before you try to find something. And the reason I say that is because if you start looking through this list, looking at the names of the reports, okay, 911 calls, abandoned calls, account code summary, agent call costs, like if you start looking through the reports, it might start to overwhelm you because there are a lot of different kinds of reports. So go in kind of knowing what styles or what kind of reports you want to see. So for example, maybe I want to see, hey, how many calls are my agents involved with? Okay, so there's kind of two ways you can search by agent. Type in up here where it says search, and you can type in the word agent, and it will show you all of the agent reports. Okay, like I said, I want to see all the calls involving my users, so I'm going to go ahead and say agent call or calls. Okay, there we go. There's one called agent calls. There are a couple different ones you can use. Agent call summary is a very popular one. But the idea here basically is start typing in something to do with what you're looking for, right? Maybe it's not agent, maybe it's group. So I would just come in here and do the same thing, type in group. We can report on individual users, on groups, as well as things like inbound calls, outbound calls, what we call external numbers. External numbers are essentially phone numbers that don't belong in that aren't part of your phone system. What I mean by that is that there's not an extension for that phone number in your phone system. Okay, so that would be any out of your phone system phone numbers. I don't know if I made that clear enough. Okay, so again, you can type in anything here and it will kind of show you what's available. You can also, however, use these filter tags. These filter tags essentially narrow down in the same way, except you're not having to type it in. If I type in or select the agent box, there's my agent reports. Okay, same thing, group, there you go. External party, external number, all of these are standard. All of these are there for you already. Okay. So those are just a couple ways you can find the reports. The other thing you can do is you can just click on the report. As you click on it over here to the right-hand side, it'll give you kind of an overview of what that report will contain. Okay. Be very careful with this. If you're on my training yesterday, I kind of mentioned this already, but this right here is filler information. Okay. The information you're seeing on this report right now is filler information. Any report that I click on will be filler information until I run the report. Once I run the report, then it will have accurate information. But for right now, this is just kind of giving you a sample of it. Really what we want you to look at is the column headers. The column headers are what we're going to be seeing on this report. Okay, so that's what I want you to look at when you're clicking through these reports. Okay. All right. So let's talk about how to run a report. Let's come here back to that agent call summary really quickly here. I'm going to talk about 3 different reports today. We'll start with this one and we'll kind of explain a little bit further as we get past this standard report section. But with the agent call summary, a little bit of anatomy. Okay, most reports, not all of them, but I would say 99.8% of them, so most of them, will have this up here. This is what we call the overall summary. Okay, so this is the grand totals for the report. Then, of course, as this is an agent call summary, this is a summary of all the calls involving my agents. Okay, so I can see here a list of the users, and then I can see also what it's looking at. Well, how many inbound calls did Aaron Evans have? Outbound calls, internal calls, and so forth. So it gives me a total. Now, to get that information and have it be accurate, I need to answer a few questions, and that's what we find down here. These are the questions that I'm going to answer to run this report. This is what we refer to as a report runner window. Now, for later purposes, I'm going to refer to these right now as what we call parameters. Okay, we're going to create a report today, and we're going to talk about parameters just a little bit. But when I say the word parameters, this is what I'm talking about. These questions right down here. Okay, so all I have to do now is answer these questions, or again, parameters. To do this, let's go ahead and run this for yesterday, the 17th, excuse me, this past Monday, the 17th. I can select any amount of time that I want as long as it was a time when Chronicall was installed. So I can do the entire month up till now. I can do last week. I can do, like I said, just Monday. This advanced option will allow me to select even more specific things such as time of day. By default, Chronicall looks at 24 hours. Maybe I don't want it to. Maybe I just want it to look at my business hours. Right, so you can go through here and make some of these changes that will make it more accurate for you, or more pinpointed to the time frames and days that you want to see. Okay. Otherwise, select the day or days, the first and last day of the time frame that you want to see, and it will highlight everything in between. Okay. I'm going to select which users, as this is an agent call summary. Keep in mind we use the word agent to represent either users or group, or extensions. Okay, so if you call them users, these are your agents are users. If you call them extensions, agents are extensions. Okay, you can either use what we refer to as a Chronicall role. A Chronicall role is essentially something that we've added in here that allows you to create, in a sense, a Chronicall created group that's separate from your phone system groups. So if there's a list of users that I want to report on, maybe I don't want to run it on the entire group, I just want to report on a handful of those users, I can create a custom or a user role or a Chronicall role, and that will allow me to report just on the users that belong to that role. Okay, so we'll go ahead and leave it with this one that I created yesterday called Justin's Team. I can add charts to the reports. Charts are just graphs, pretty simple. And then from there, I get to choose my format, PDF, Excel spreadsheet, HTML, or comma separated value, and then I just have to hit run report. That's it. It's a very, very simple process to run those reports. Okay. Now, I will mention that you can also schedule these reports. I'm not going to go into that in detail today just for time's sake here. But if you want to know how to schedule reports, I do have an article about how to do that, step-by-step instructions on that documentation site that I showed you. Also, you're welcome to jump into my Tuesday training if you haven't done so already. Okay. That's how I run a report. Here we have the overall summary, right? Here we have the breakdown by individual users. And then we have our charts to represent the information. So for example, I have a missed calls bar chart here. I see that there was one missed call, and it was by David Green. If I come back up here, here's my missed calls column, and I can see one, David Green. Okay, so quite simple to run reports. All right, that's just a brief overview I wanted to do with standard reports. Really quickly, let's stop here for just a second. Are there any questions on standard reports? Okay. Perfect. All right, then. Well, let's go ahead and get to the fun stuff. All right, let's get overwhelmed for just a second because custom reports is a fantastic tool, but it can be a little overwhelming. Okay, and that's just because it's not in a bad thing. It's not in a bad way. The idea with custom reports is we wanted to give you complete flexibility. We wanted you to be able to customize this to your specific needs and to your specific company. The problem with it is that there's a lot to choose from. Okay. So the first thing I want to discuss is probably the most difficult, and that's what we refer to as create report. Okay, pretty simple, pretty generic name. But to create a report, all I have to do is come here where it says create report. Now, when I do this, it's going to pull up a new window or a new page here. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to have all of these different options to choose from. Okay, we have agent, account code, call direction, and so forth. Well, what in the world do each of these reports do, or what kind of information is this going to give me? These reports, these different report styles, fit into one of three categories. Okay, so let's talk about those categories really quick to help make this a little bit more useful, make a little bit more sense for you. Now, if I want to know what kind of report this is going to be, I need to look in this column right here. This column will tell me what kind of report this is going to be. So let's start with the first style of report or first category of report. It's what we call a summary report. Now, summary reports are really, really easy to find in standard reports because they all have the word summary right in the title. You'll notice how many different summary reports there are, okay? There are a lot, right? So if it's a summary report, what am I going to see? What kind of information is that going to give me? Well, it's in the name. It's a summary. It's summary information. It's totals of information. So again, coming back to one of our most popular summary reports, which is the agent call summary, it's going to show me per user, as it is the agent call summary, per user, how many calls they were involved with total. Okay, so summary reports are just that. But if I come back to this create report list, you'll notice here, it is alphabetical. If I come down here, I'm not going to see an option called summary. So how do I know if a report's going to be a summary? How do I know if it's going to give me those totals? Well, again, as I mentioned, look here in this column. Okay, this column, depending on what's found here, will tell me or will signify if this is a summary report. So this is where it's going to get a little overwhelming for just a second, because I'm going to give you a whole list of things here that you might see if it's going to be a summary report. Okay, so if you're not taking notes, I do recommend doing so now. As I explain summary reports, I will then explain the next two different styles of reports, and it will help make summary reports much easier. Okay, so let's just start with this. If I want to know if a report is a summary report or a summary style report, in this column, I will see one of a handful of things. If I ever see a name, and that can be a person's name, so agent name, or even caller ID. Caller ID is the name of the person involved with that call on the outside, right? Not one of your users, but it's an external person. Okay, so if I ever see a name, username, caller ID name, if I ever see a group name, it's a summary report. If I ever see what we call an account code, account codes really are for only for those of you that have our agent dashboards module. Okay, these are account codes as far as the agent dashboard goes. So if you don't have agent dashboards, you'll probably never ever use that option. Okay, but if you have agent dashboards, which I do recommend you signing up for my Thursday training, where I discuss agent account codes a little bit more. But if you ever see an account code here, if you're familiar with those, it'll be a summary report. If I ever see a call direction, inbound, outbound, internal, it's going to be a summary report. If I ever see a phone number, such as an external number or a local number, okay, local numbers are like a 1-800 number that people dial to get into your office, right? So in our office, we have a 1-800 number. When you call in, you hit that number first, and then you select from our auto attendant where to go to, and then it routes it to that specific group. Okay. So those are the main things you're going to see if it's a summary report. Let me recap. Things like an agent name, caller ID, group, account code, or phone number. I think I said call direction as well. If I didn't, then call direction as well. And of course, again, phone number. All of those are going to be summary reports. Now that might be a little overwhelming, and you might not remember that, and that's perfectly fine. Let me make this a little bit easier on you. Okay, let's come back to run reports here really quick. And like I said, I selected the agent call summary as one of our summary reports to show you. Well, let's take this, for example, Alexander Mitchell. Let's say Alexander Mitchell had 16 inbound calls. Well, that's great. I love that he had 16 inbound calls, but I don't want to know just the number of how many calls he was involved with. I want to see those calls. So this would require a different kind of report. And in fact, the one we would use is what we call agent calls. Okay, actually, I'll actually go even further and be more specific and do agent inbound calls. Okay, because that's what I saw. He had 16 inbound calls. So this is a report I would use, but you'll notice here in this list, there's not a name, there's not a call direction, there's not a group name. What we see is called a call ID. A call ID is not a caller ID. A call ID, this number is a number that's associated with this specific phone call in the Chronicall database. Okay. Now those call IDs are helpful because if I want to know more about what happened on a call, I can actually copy that number, take it over to Cradle to Grave for the same time, and paste it in our quick search tool, and it will take me directly to that call so I can see the exact details of the call, hence the name a detailed report. So these are called detailed reports. Let me show you one of our most popular, and that's the abandoned calls report. The abandoned calls report is probably, if not the most popular, one of the most popular of our detailed reports. Again, because I've got this call ID here, each line is going to represent a specific phone call. Okay, and I can then copy that number, take it over to Cradle to Grave to get the full details of what took place. So if I want to create a detailed report, and we're going to create one a little later today, but if I want to create a detailed report, here in this list, I only have 3 options. I have call, which is by far the most common. We have event, and we have feature. Now, here's how you can really quickly tell. Again, keep your eye on this column here. Here's the feature one. You'll see the word feature ID. If I click on event, I'll see event ID, call ID. If you ever see the word ID in this column, it's a detailed report. Okay. Last style of report. I'll show you one of our most popular. We have a report called the Inbound Call Performance Report. This report is a fantastic report because it allows me to see when are we busiest, when are we slowest, when should I schedule more people, when should I not schedule as many people, right? This is a really great kind of, it's almost like a projection report, right? It helps me to kind of see our statistics as far as like common times we're busy and slow and that kind of information. So the inbound call performance focuses on inbound calls. Now, at the heart of things, this is actually a summary report. It's showing me summary of information, right? Showing me details on how many calls were presented, answered, abandoned, and so forth. This actually is also really great for like a service level agreement report because it shows me, hey, how many calls were answered within 10 seconds or within 15 seconds, 30, 45, 60. So you can see some really great information there. Although this is summary information, it's not a summary report. Okay, it's what we refer to as a time interval report. Time interval reports report on specific time intervals. Like I said, I want to see when we're busiest, when we're slowest, that kind of information. So these time interval reports allow me to report on things like hours of day, minutes of hour, months of year, days of week, days of month, days of year. You have all these different options here. So if I want to see specific time intervals, I'm going to use a time interval report. Okay, now we've created a tag up here for time interval reports. We don't have a lot. If you click on that time interval tag, it'll show you all of the time interval calls that we have, or all time interval reports that we have. Fortunately, if I want to create a time interval report, there's only one option. That's time. Okay, so if I want to create a time interval report, I'll use time. If I want to create a detailed report, just to kind of recap, I'll use call, event, or feature. Everything else is a summary report. Okay, so hopefully that makes it a little bit easier. Almost everything here is a summary report. So again, everything except for call, event, and feature, which are detailed reports, and then time, which is a time interval report. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, all right then, let's do the fun stuff. We're going to create 2 reports today. And so we'll start with one of them, and then we'll talk about editing a report. We'll talk about custom reports again, and then at the end, we'll create another report because I want to show you some of the advanced things that you can do with this. Okay. So let's start off by creating one of the most popular, which is an agent report. So all I have to do is select agent, and then come down here and hit next. This is both where Chronicall custom reports gets very simple and somewhat complicated at the same time, and here's why. To build this report, all I have to do is hit add. Once I hit add, it's going to pop up with a window that's going to feature for me a list of options that I have to use to create this report. Now, these options that you see in this list will be different based upon this kind of report that I'm creating. So if I'm creating a time interval report, it will have different values here. If I'm creating a call detail report, it will have different values here. Okay. So let's create a simple report. I want to see, for example, hey, I want to see how many calls they had overall. So I'll select the call count option and then hit OK. Boom, there it is on my report. Let's hit add again. Not only do I want to see call count, but I want to see, hey, how many calls were transferred by that agent? Boom. How many calls were transferred to that agent? Boom. So it's very simple, right? If you know, as I mentioned earlier, know before you go, know what it is that you want to see on that report before you build it. It'll make it much easier to create that report. Now I'm making it look almost too easy right now, right? Here's what I want to show you. When I hit add again, as I mentioned, I have this list of options that pops up. Now I'm going to come back here and hit cancel, and I'm going to edit call count, right? I selected that already, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and hit edit. Now what happens here is it's going to show call count selected. What's all of this right here? There's 2 things. We've got a description tab, and that will show you what that means, okay? Call count shows the total number of calls, inbound, outbound, and internal, given agent. Well, to me, that's too broad, right? That's not going to cut for what I need to see, what I want to see. So I need to make a few adjustments. Let's come back to this call count tab. Now, if those of you who have used Chronicall before or have been using Chronicall, you're familiar or should be somewhat familiar with cradle to grave. This looks kind of similar to those cradle to grave filters, right? We've got these filters now that we can now use that will allow us to, I guess you could say, tweak this or make this reflect exactly what I want to see. Call count is too broad. So we've got several sections. We've got required criteria. The required criteria for call count is the column header. In other words, the name of that column. I'm going to change this. I'm going to call this inbound greater than 3. Okay, kind of cryptic. I'll explain what that means in just a second here. General criteria are things that I can add if I want to. We'll come back to that. Maybe not with this value, but we'll come back to that. We can also do things like event level. Event level are very, they're kind of basic, but they're more, they give me more flexibility with this specific value. Let me show you what I mean. So I called this inbound greater than 3. What's greater than 3? Well, here's my event type. I want this to look at a specific call or only show me specific calls that have specific events. So say, for example, here's my list of events. I want to make sure that this call actually has a talking event on it. So I'll select talking and hit OK. That's all I'm going to do here. I called this inbound greater than 3. So let's come to my call level option. We're going to do a couple things here under call level. First off, I called this inbound greater than 3. I need to specify my call direction because as it is, call cost looks at all call directions. Well, I want this to only look at inbound. So there we go, inbound. And greater than 3. Well, I want to know how many calls they had inbound with a talking event greater than 3 minutes. So I'll scroll down here a little bit further. I'm going to look for event duration. There's event duration. What's my event? It's talking. I want to know anytime that there's a call that has a talking event greater than, in fact, I'll say greater than or equal to 3 minutes. Okay. That's my value. I used call count, but I specified that I want it to be inbound calls with a talking event greater than 3 minutes. There we go. So that is why this becomes somewhat complicated, and it's complicated in a good way. It allows you to do whatever you want, right? So if I have something on here that I'm like, oh man, this is close to what I'm looking for, but not quite, change it. Make it reflect exactly what you want to see. Let's do another one. Let's do answered calls. Well, guess what? To me, my company has a service level agreement, and that service level agreement means that I only want to see calls as long as it was answered within less than 10 seconds. So I'm going to change the name to this again. Again, my required criteria is just the name. So we're going to go ahead and say less than, less than 10. Okay. Now we need to make that change. Well, what was answered, or what's, how does it know it was answered in less than 10 seconds? Well, we're going to scroll down here to the very bottom, and we're going to look for an option called speed of answer. Less than 10 seconds. Great. Hit OK. Now we have answered less than 10. Let's hit add again. This time we're going to do the opposite. Answered in greater than 10. Okay, greater than 10. And I want to do this. I'm going to set a column threshold on here. I'm going to use one of these general criteria options. Well, what does column threshold mean? Well, that means if I have anything less than, let's say 10, that's good, right? Because most of my calls should be answered within less than 10 seconds. So if I have less than 10 calls that were answered within less than 10 or greater than 10 seconds, that's good. So I'm now going to put a threshold here that says, okay, if they had more than 10 calls or 10 or more calls that were answered within greater than 10 seconds, I want that to turn yellow. If it's over 20, I want that to turn red to signify to me that they're not hitting where they should be hitting with those calls answered in greater than 10 seconds. Okay. So the more that they have answered within greater than 10 seconds, the worse it is. I don't know if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense. Now I have kind of two options with this. I can have the text change color, but I'm colorblind. That's hard for me to see. Personally, I like to do the background color. Hit OK. Now we can come down here again and say, okay, speed of answer greater than, greater than 10 seconds. Hit OK. So that's what that's going to look like. If I have more than 10 calls that were answered in longer than 10 seconds, they're gonna turn color. Okay, so you can see that really easily there. So like I said, you can have this report reflect exactly what you want to. It's just a matter of knowing how to make those changes, right? And really all it is come in here, find the value that you're looking for, okay, and change it, tweak it to represent what you want to see. Let's say abandoned calls, okay? But I only want to count an abandoned call. Now really quickly, let me give you a description of what an abandoned call is. Shows the number of inbound calls associated with a given agent that did not end in a talking or a voicemail event. Okay, so these are calls that entered the system but were ended prematurely by the calling party. So if it doesn't end in talking or voicemail, it will be counted as an abandoned call. So if it's a hold event or a park event or even like a ringing event, if it ends in a ringing event, it actually counts as two things. It counts as a missed call because a ringing event is a call or an event where, a missed call, excuse me, is an event where it rings to my extension and I don't answer it. Okay, so if it rings to my extension, they hang up while it's ringing, it'll count as a missed call as well as an abandoned call. For this specific purpose, I want to be more specific than that. So I'm going to go ahead and say under abandoned calls, I'm still going to call it abandoned, but guess what? I'm going to come down here under call level and I'm going to say, look, I only want it to show calls where that final event was just a hold event. Okay, so it's only going to look at calls that had a hold event as the final event. Right? So like I said, you are going to make this the way that you want to make it. You are going to specify what you want these values to mean. Of course, you can take it at face value. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to tweak this so it represents you more, then do it. That's great. It's really actually quite simple. It's just a matter of, again, knowing what it is that you want to see. Now, I have one other main thing to show you here. But before I do that, I don't want to get too far. Are there any questions about this so far? Okay, hopefully this is clear, right? Okay, now let's talk about one last thing. I'm going to go ahead and hit add again. I mentioned that service level agreement earlier, right? I said anything that's answered in less than 10 seconds, that's my service level agreement. Great. Well, I want to see a percentage of how many calls are being answered within that service level agreement. But there may not be a percentage option here. Okay, I mean, we have things like percent answered, percent calls abandoned, percent missed. That's great, but it doesn't have how many calls were presented in my service level agreement that did we answer? What percent did we answer? So that's not here. It doesn't exist. So I need to create that option. So I'm going to come down here where it says add formula. Add FX means add formula. Now this is going to be a simple formula here, but you can actually create your own formulas as complicated as you need them to be, as you want them to be. All you have to do is know exactly what you're looking for and how to build that formula. Now, if you're really good at Excel, this is fairly simple. If you're not good at Excel like me, this can be a little bit more difficult, okay? But it's actually still fairly simple. So let me show you really quickly. I want to see percent answered in SLA, service level agreement. So now I need to build that formula, or you need to select the values that I want to use to build that formula. Let's hit add. Now, like I said, this is a fairly simple one. I'm just going to come here to answered calls, and I'm going to go ahead and tweak that to my service level agreement. Less than, in fact, we'll say less than or equal to 10 seconds. Okay, good. Now I need to select the other value that I want to use to create the formula. Here's value. I mean, even though it says value 0, it's value number 1. Hit add. And let's come down here to presented calls. Okay, there it is right there. And I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to leave that one as is. So there are my two formulas, value 0 and value 1. Let's go ahead and do a really quick equation here. I'm just going to put a division symbol between those two features. So in other words, answer calls divided by presented calls. And I want that to give me a percent. I can even test that formula. Formula is valid. Perfect. Hit OK. Hit OK. Now that formula that I just created will now be part of my list of values. I can use that formula on future reports if I want to. Okay, there it is right there. It'll say formula after it, signifying that I created that one. From there, I hit OK, and again, it's on my report. So it's actually fairly simple to create a report. Again, like I said, it's just a matter of knowing exactly what it is that you want to see on that report. Okay, I know I asked this just a minute ago, but are there any questions about this before we move on? All right, once I have my report created, I have the values on that report that I want, I can come down here and hit next. Now, as I hit next, it's going to say, hey, Blake, do you remember that overall summary at the top of that report? Do you want to put that here on the report? Sure. Let's go and see total inbound calls greater than 3, total calls transferred by agent, total calls transferred to agent, total calls answered in less than 10 seconds, greater than 10 seconds, total calls abandoned, and then the average percent answered in SLA. Right? So there's my overall summary. Pretty simple. I hit next, and now it's going to say, okay, well, what do you want to call this report? I'm going to call this, I just want to call this, let's do just Blake's custom, just like that. Okay, can catch up. There we go. All right. Now, when I'm done with this report, I can have it in my specific orientation. There's only 2. There's portrait or landscape. By default, it'll be portrait. And then from there, I have this option called default parameter values. Remember, parameters are the questions I'm going to answer to run the report. So basically what this is giving me the option to do is I can answer those right now, or I can wait till I go and run the report. Because maybe I'm not ready to run it, I just wanted to create it. Okay, so if I am ready to run it though, I can answer those questions here. What's my report time frame? Well, I want to see the 10th. In fact, I'm going to see the entire week last week, 10th through the 14th. Hit OK. Which users do I want featured? As this is a user report or an agent report, I'm going to go ahead and say Justin's team. Now, this is the one thing that this is the only thing here where I can only do this here. Okay, I can't do this anywhere else within Chronicall. I have the option to sort this report how I want to. I want this to be, by default, it's ascending by agent. Maybe I want it to be descending by agent. Or maybe I want it to be ascending by who answered the most calls under 10 seconds. Okay, so you can tweak that however you want. I can add those charts if I want to, just like this. Okay. Then we go ahead and hit OK, and then from there we can hit finish. And that report is now ready to run. In fact, it shows up in the list of my standard reports. Okay, there it is right there. And look at this, I've already got my questions ready to go, so all I have to do is hit run report. Now, this report probably won't come up with anything really pretty or really impressive. Number one, this is just a demo. Number two, it's not a very well thought through report. But you can see here, answered calls in greater than 10 seconds. Erica Owens, she hit that threshold. She had more than 10 calls answered within answered within greater than 10 seconds. Mario Kelly, he's probably just on his way out the door because he's had more than 20, right? He's at 45 calls answered within greater than 10 seconds. That's an issue. But you'll see that those colors will change based upon where they fall on that list. Okay. Here's my my percent level answered in service level agreement. The highest it looks like is Jenna Bailey. Okay. So she's at 57.1%. So there's a report. Like I said, it's not super impressive, but that's how I build and create a report. All right, cool. Now, just one more time for good measure before we move on to the second part of this, which is editing reports. Are there any questions about creating a report from scratch? Okay. All right. So let's talk about editing a report. Now, editing a report, in my opinion, is the best thing to do, and here's why. With creating a report, you start from the ground up, right? Usually, typically speaking, you'll go in thinking, okay, this is what I want to see on that report. Now, when we created the standard reports, we tried to create them in a way that would provide the option, essentially the ability to cover all bases, right? We wanted to be able to cover everything. Now, of course, we can't, right? There are going to be situations, of course, for like all of you on here today, where you're going to need more flexibility, and that's great. That's what custom reports and creating a report is all about. But sometimes I'm able to find a report that really closely matches what it is that I'm looking for. Right? So maybe, for example, that agent call summary is a report that I'm like, this is really good. It's just got a few things missing. Or maybe I just wish it had some different definitions for separate things, right? Well, if that's the case, if you find a report that really closely matches what it is that you're looking for, right-click on that report and hit Edit Report. This means that you can change this to reflect. Now you have two options here. You can either edit a copy or edit the original. I 100% always recommend editing a copy. And that's strictly because if I edit the original, as cool as I think I am, as great as I think I am at my job, I don't have enough faith in myself to say that I will never, ever need that again, right? So I never edit the original. That's just personal. I always say edit a copy. And so when I do that, it'll say copy of agent call summary. So here's the report. The benefit here is I already have a foundation to work with. I've already got something to build on rather than to build from the ground up. I have something to work with here. Right, so there's my answered calls. Okay, guess what? I want to change that to my service level agreement. We'll go ahead and hit edit here. And again, I'm going to change the name. I don't want this to be called answered calls. I'm going to have it answered less than 10. Okay, and I would come down here and make that change. Call is answered, speed of answer less than 10 seconds. There it is. Okay, so it has my definition on there. You know what? I want to add that service level agreement that I created. So we're going to come here, % answered in service level agreement. Hit OK. Great. Now that's on my report. Guess what? I don't really care. In fact, I'm just going to do this. I don't really care about total talking duration. I'm going to remove that. Okay. So the idea basically is I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time editing a report because I think you get it. It's just like creating a report, but the difference is I'm working with something that already exists, so that it's easier for me to build on that foundation, right? So now, again, let's do this one here, inbound calls. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit. I want to change this one again. There's call count. You'll notice here that this value in our list of values on this report was created under call count. So inbound calls, and then what do we do? Greater than 3. What do we do? Event type, talking, OK. Event duration, greater than or equal to 3. Just like that. There we go. Okay, I've already done that before. But now, again, I have something to work off of. Okay, so I always recommend editing a report. If you're going through trying to think, okay, these are the things I want to see, look through the reports first to see if there's something that really closely fits. Because if it does, again, you're going to spend less time and less work on editing the report than you are on creating the report from the ground up. Okay. Once I've made my changes to that report, same thing. I just hit next, and it's going to say, hey, that overall summary, you've added some new things. Do you want to add those to your list? Sure. Let's go ahead and add that average % answered, and that's good. Hit next. Okay. What do we want to call this? Well, we're going to call this Blake's. Come on, there you go. Blake's edit, just like that. Edit summary or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. Okay. Of course, you can do your default parameter values, but at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and hit finish. And that report that I just created is now in my list again of standard reports. I'll be able to tell it's a custom report though, however, because number one, the name, right? Because it's Blake's edit, but also because this little pencil symbol is there instead of the Xima logo. So it's much easier to edit a report because it already exists. Okay. Any questions there?
Quick question.
Yeah.
Going back to, I think I lost it. Going back to the time, whenever you're doing more than or equal to, does it always equivalent to seconds, or can you change it to minutes?
Oh, you can absolutely change it to minutes. Yeah. So let's do this here. I'll come back. And we'll say edit the report here. So like, for example, like you're talking kind of about this answered in less than 10 seconds or the answered inbound calls greater than 3. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah. So in that scenario, it's just kind of in that same area. I just changed that based upon, so this is going to be your hours, this is going to be your minutes, and this is going to be your seconds. Okay. So if I don't want it to be 10 seconds, if you want it to be whatever, I can change that to minutes. I can change it to hours, whatever you prefer.
Okay, so it's under speed of answer.
Yeah, well, you can do that under speed of answer, or you can do that under event duration. Okay, so it kind of just depends on what it is that you're looking at. So, like, can you give me a specific scenario? Like, what is it that you would want to see?
So let's say that I wanted to see the agents who are on calls longer than 13 minutes.
Okay. Okay, great. So you can do a couple things here. Let's come here. So there's a couple options. You can do call duration. So you can come to call duration and you can do things like right here where it says call duration greater than or equal to 13 minutes. Okay, so just like that right there. So you could use call duration or you could use call count. Either way, call duration is easier because it's already looking at call duration. And you could say, I want to see the total call duration, or I want to see the average call duration or the minimum call duration. In your scenario, if you're looking to see how many calls they've been on for greater than 13 minutes, I would do call count. Okay, so I would just go to call count and then I would do that call duration right here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you're welcome. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for not being shy. All right, cool, I appreciate it. Okay, let's take just a minute here. I really quickly, again, of course, editing a report, like I mentioned, is really similar. I won't spend too much time on there. We're going to create another report, but I want to do that in just a minute here. The first thing I want to discuss really quickly as we kind of finish up here is I want to talk about that report skin, right? Report skins are those things that are kind of the cherry on top. Maybe I want it, maybe I don't. All right, so this is, of course, all up to you and what it is that you want to see. Let me do this really quickly. I'm going to open up because my reports I just created were not in that list. It's because I opened that before I created the reports. Okay, so here's my edit summary right here. I want to change, great, I've got my columns changed here, but guess what? I want to change the way that this report looks. Okay, so that's where I come down here now to report skin. It's on Xima default. That's probably, you'll either have Xima default or Xima classic. You'll have those two options to start off with, but I want to create my own. So I'm going to click on this little ellipsis tool here, and that will open up my report skin builder. Now, this can be somewhat intimidating. The main idea here is you're going to be able to change colors. You can add the report header. Like if you don't like this header, you can create your own. It does take a little extra work because you're going to have to create that on your side. Maybe your company already has one that they put on documents. If they do, great. Get that PNG. PNG is like sometimes they call it a transparent document or a transparent file. Okay, they're usually called PNGs. Okay, so with this, again, you don't have to do this. This is just something that you can do extra. Let's start from the top here and work kind of our way down. First off with header color. Now you'll notice here with header color, just really quickly, header is referring to this right here. Header color is this right here. You're going to notice there's a number in there. That's what we call a color code. Some people call it an RGB code or a hex code. But the idea basically is this. If I want to change that color, all I have to do is open up this option, and I have kind of a few options here. The first is you are probably much better with colors than I am. I am in fact colorblind, right? So this doesn't work super well for me. But if I'm trying to, figure out, hey, I want this to match my company, right? You can click on these options here, and you'll notice as I do it, it will kind of show you what that's going to look like. And then from there, I can hit OK, and that will change that color for me. Okay. Now you can do that, or if you by chance do know the color code, you can come here to this RGB option and type that color code in right here, and that will allow you to get the specific colors that you use in your company. I was really close. Look at that. Okay, so there's my new color. Great. I'm going to do the same thing with row label color. This is the row label color here, as is this right here. Typically, I do this one a little bit lighter, right? So again, I can try to eye that to the best of my abilities. Or again, if I know that specific color code, I can type my color code in here. Okay, so there's my new color code. Right? So you can go through this entire list here and change anything here. I don't like this font color. This is what we call our row label font. So here's row label font. It shows me what font it's using, and I of course can change that. This one again, though, I do want to change the color. I'm just going to make that white because I want to see the background a little bit, or I want it to pop from the background a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so you can change anything there. The main thing that people want to change on these reports is the header and the logo. It's actually the logo most often, of course. Could you believe? All right, there you go. So let's go ahead and start here where it says header image. This is my header image right here. Now, you don't have to have one of these. You can leave it as is. Again, like I said, you can have someone in your company, or if you're good at this kind of stuff, you can create it, have someone create it for you. But header image, I'm going to use one that I use for this specific purpose that I've saved and that I use on a regular basis for this, like I said, for this class here. So I've got my demo items here. There's my demo header. Hit open, and it'll appear here for me. There it is. Okay. Notice I've matched some of my colors to the things that you see on my header. Now my logo. This is the big one. Right here where it says logo image, I can change what my logo is. Same thing. I just find wherever it is that I've saved it. And then from there, once I have it, I'll have to just select it, hit open, and it will be put in place. Okay. Now, at this point, that's kind of small and it's in a weird spot. We do have some other things we can do here: logo X, logo Y, and logo scale. Logo scale is the size of my logo. Now, you can use these little arrows to go up and down to make it bigger, smaller, just tweak it a little bit, little by little. Me personally, I like to go ahead and just type in a number, and I hit enter, and that will make it the size that I want it to be. There we go. Okay. But now it's in a weird spot. Again, this is where logo X and logo Y come in. Logo Y is up and down, logo X is right and left. If I go down on logo Y, it goes up. If I push up, it goes down. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and do this right there, hit enter. Okay, so there it is. It's its new spot. In fact, I'm going to go up one more, just use that little arrow, and there we go. I'm going to move it to the right just a little bit. Just click up on the logo X, and that will put it in place for me. Okay, so there's my new report. Nice and pretty. We can go ahead and save now. Or save as. I'll go ahead and just change the name to that. So it would be my company name. I'm going to call this fake, and then hit OK, and then hit close. And now I should have in my list of options here my new report skin. And if I run this report with this report skin, from this point on, it'll always be in that report skin. Okay, so let's just run this to see what this is going to look like when it's finished here. Okay. So again, like I said, you may or may not ever use this, but it is an option that you have, like I said, kind of that cherry on top to not only give you the ability to have your values on the report, but also your colors, your logo, that kind of information. So it is completely your report. Super pretty. There you have it. Okay. Anyway, any questions about creating a report skin? I'm going to go ahead and delete this because guess what? I don't love it, right? So we're just going to go ahead and remove that, and then there we have it. Okay. Cool. Let's do one last thing here, and that is to show you an advanced feature here. Okay. So we're going to create one more report. This time we're going to create a detailed report. All right. So I'm going to do a call detail report. We'll hit call, and then we'll go ahead and hit next. Remember, in this list we should see call ID, which there it is. So each line on this report is going to represent one phone call. Okay. Hit next. Now, when I hit next, it's actually going to take us to a window that we have not yet seen. We'll come back to this in just a minute. We'll hit next again. Let's go ahead now and build our report. Again, to do this, all I have to do is hit add. Now, in this process, again, keep in mind, I mentioned earlier, these are going to change based upon the kind of report that you're creating. So you'll notice that these are not going to have the same values that were on that agent report. Right, so these will be different. So let's start with something like caller ID. I want to see the name of the person involved with that call. As long as the call service provider or the phone service provider provides us that information, we will get that information. If it doesn't, then we won't. It's simple, basic caller ID. So we've got the caller ID, which is their name. I want to see their phone number as well. Let's do external party. Great, hit add. To add again, let's do something like this. Let's do call direction. Okay, hit add again. Let's do a U.S. city and state, and that will change. It's not just U.S. city; it's also province. Okay, so it's not just here local. It's just not here in the States. Okay, so you can add whatever you want. Let's do 2 more. In fact, let's do 3 more, just really quickly here. Let's do start time, except I don't want it to be start time. I actually want it to be the date. So I'm going to come back down here and do this. Boom. We're going to change the name to that to just date. Okay, so I can see the day of the call. And now we can go ahead and say start time and end time. Start time, I want this to be displayed like this. There we go. Do one more and we'll do end time. Okay, so this report clearly is the best report we've ever seen, right? It's not a great report, but we can go ahead and just build that. There's my report. Lovely, it's done. We'll go ahead and hit next, and it's going to say, hey, Blake, do you remember that overall summary? Sure. Do I want to add it? Not necessarily for this one. It's fine. We'll go ahead and hit next. Okay, well, what do you want to call this? Well, I want to call this Blake's detailed. Okay, there's my detailed report, and hit finish. Great. So I've got my report done. It's the best one I've ever built. Let's go ahead and run that report. But here's my problem. Okay, let's start with, of course, report time frame. I want to see, again, let's just go ahead and say the 17th. And then we can go ahead and select charts if we want to. This one, I'm not really going to add charts. Here's my issue. Who is this report reporting on? Which groups? Which users? I don't know. In fact, right now, as it is, it's reporting on every single phone call that took place on my phone system, which is fine. That might be what I want to see. But there's a good chance that I want to know who's involved with these calls. So how can I get that? Well, I have to create a parameter. In other words, I have to create a question here that gives me the option to select which users and which groups. So how do I do that? Well, let's come back to this report here. We're going to right click and we're going to hit edit, edit report. It actually takes us to that second window that we skipped. Well, we're not going to skip it this time. We're actually going to use it. We can now create what we call a parameter. To do this, I hit add filter, and it's going to pop up very similar to what we did with, like I said, cradle to grave, or with adding values to a report. This time, however, I'm not adding a value. I'm adding who I want this report to look at, or what kind of information do I want this report to look at. As I mentioned, maybe I want this to be an agent report, or maybe I want it to be a group report. Now I have two options. For agent, let's go ahead and just select this ellipsis here, and that's going to pop up with my list of agents, right? I could say Justin's team. The problem with this is that when I finish this report will only ever look at Justin's team. It will not look at anybody else. It'll only look at the users that belong to Justin's team. Well, what if I want to run that report on another team or another list of users? Well, I'd have to come back in here and edit that report again. I don't want to do that. That's too much work. So right here where it says agent, kind of in this blank space next to it, I'm going to right click here, and it gives me a couple options. I'm going to create a new parameter. That new parameter is going to be called agent, and hit OK. You don't really see anything change here except for this right here. We'll come back to, we'll kind of show you what this did. But just to kind of let you know, I can do that with any one of these values here, any one of these options, literally anything in this list. Okay, so if I want to create a parameter for anything here, I can. Well, for now, we'll go ahead and hit next. We've already got our values on the report, so that's good. We'll hit next again. It's going to take us to another window that we're going to skip for now, but we'll come back to again in just a minute. Hit next again, hit next, and finish. Great, so there's my report. Again, beautiful, wonderful report, but now you'll notice I have the option to select agents. Okay, that wasn't there, of course, before. So now I have the option to select which users. After I select this report and run it on Justin's team, guess what? I can deselect Justin's team and now run it on another set of users. I don't have to edit the report again. Okay, so that's kind of nice. But I have one more problem. Not only can, of course, now I can see who, or I can select which users I want this to look at, but here's my other problem. Even though I can select which users I want this to look at, I still have no idea who was involved with which call. It doesn't tell me anything about that. Yes, it is looking at the selected users, but it's not telling me which ones were involved with which calls. Now, I do have the option. I'm going to hit edit on this report again. I do have the option to add things like receiving agent or calling agent. So if the call is outbound, it'll in my calling agent list or column, it will show the calling agent. If it's a call that's inbound, I can see where it says receiving agent, I can see the agent. So I could do that, but what I prefer to do instead is I'm going to come here and hit next, and I'm going to come to this window. By default, this does not do what we call subgroup the report or subreport the report. What does this mean? Well, if it's on none, it doesn't mean anything. But if I select agent, what you'll notice now is over here, it's changed. Sub-reports within the reports basically means for each agent, you're going to get a mini report within the report. So when I select a user, it will break this down by users. So it would say Blake, and it would show me Blake's calls. Then it would say Natasha, and it would show me Natasha's calls. Then I would see Stephen, and it would show me Stephen's calls. Okay, so you can have a sub-report. It can show you which users were involved with which calls because it will create a mini report within the report. Okay, so we'd see agent 1, here's their calls. Agent 2, there's their calls. So it will break it apart for you. Now, you may never, ever use that, okay? You can actually do that with anything, any type of report that I create. If I come back to that summary report that I created, in fact, if I come here to Blake's custom report, this is the one I'd rather do. I can do that from here as well. All I have to do is say edit the report. If I add a new column to that report, so let's say this, I hit add and I want to see something like event count. I can actually, for that event, I can right-click here where it says group, and I can say create new parameter for group. Okay, so you can do that anywhere really. It's just that I see that most often in the detailed reports, because that's where, again, you're going to have to use those parameters that aren't presented to you automatically. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, any questions about anything else we've discussed today? Okay, just want to give you a little extra time there. All right, guys, customer reports are actually somewhat simple and complicated, of course, but know before you go. Know what it is that you're looking for, because it will help you that much more when you're in there building in the report. If you're looking at those values might seem confusing at first, okay? But they will become more clear as you work with them more. Now, I will show you one last thing here. If I go to that guide site, then here, what I will show you is under the custom reports, we have another option called custom report values. Now, this is going to be growing here in the next little bit, but for right now, report filter criteria. If I have a question about what something means, what does it mean for call cost profile, or what does it mean by column threshold? We have a definition here for you. In fact, we've separated by every single one. So under call level, if I want to know call does not include event, what does that mean? If I click on that, it will show you call does not include event, and it will give you a description of what that means. Okay, so if you're not sure, this is a great resource for you. It will help answer a lot of those questions. You don't actually have to go directly to this custom report values. If I come up here to the very top and here where it says search, and I say speed of answer, then I can see here, maybe not. Maybe it's, let's see, view all results. There we go. Okay, so then I can start seeing, maybe not. Maybe I need to look at that a little bit more. Okay. Well, anyway, most of them you can type in here and it should show you. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Report filter criteria. There it is. Okay. Yeah. So it may not take you directly to it, but you can see that here, right? So if I come in here, speed of answer, there it is right there. Okay. Sorry, I misled you a little bit there. It's new. Forgive me. Okay. Any questions about, like I said, I know I just asked this a second ago, but just to make sure, any questions that you guys have thought of in the past minute or so before we finish up here? Okay. Well, I hope this has been beneficial. I hope we've been able to answer some of those questions for you that you might have had coming in here. Let us know if you do have further questions. We're happy to help in any way that we can.